September 1943. Kummersdorf proving ground, 30 kilometers from Berlin. German engineers from the Wehrmacht Ordnance Directorate stand around a captured American shell, silent not from admiration, but outraged. Chief Engineer Hans Schneider holds an empty copper cone, turning it in the light, searching for complexity. He finds only a sheet of metal, folded into a cone. "This is impossible," he finally says. "This cannot penetrate 150 millimeters of armor." Yet it does. The shell was pulled from a knocked-out tiger at Salerno, and the tiger has 100 millimeter frontal armor. The shell went straight through. Worst of all, this is mass-produced. The Americans stamped them out by thousands. No intricate mechanics, no exotic alloys, just explosive and a copper cone. This is the story of how physics defeated engineering, how a simple effect known since the 17th century became one of the Second World War's most terrifying weapons, and how the Germans, despite possessing theoretical knowledge, lost to American speed of implementation. By 1942, the United States began mass production of shaped charge rounds for bazookas and guns. By late 1943, they had produced over 2 million such munitions. Germany had superior engineers and deeper theoretical understanding, but Americans had a simple solution and industrial might. When German specialists examined American bazooka models M6A1 and 9A1, they expected complex mechanisms, precision cones, special alloys. Instead, they found what could be made in a country workshop. This shocked them more than the penetration ability itself. German war industry in 1943 was overburdened. Every weapon required special machine tools, skilled workers, rare materials. The Americans created a munition they could manufacture faster than tanks. This isn't a tale of lone genius inventing miracles. It's pragmatism versus perfectionism. Victory goes not to who makes the best, but who makes good enough 1,000 times faster. The Monroe Effect, 1888, Fort Monroe, Virginia. Captain Charles Monroe studies explosives, asking the standard artilleryman's question, how to extract more energy from smaller charges. He places dynamite on a steel plate and detonates it. Small crater. Then he takes dynamite bearing the manufacturer's stamp, a small concave indentation, places it stamped down and detonates. The result surprises. Not a crater, but an almost perfectly round hole, deep and precise, with minimal surrounding damage. When explosive surface contains a cavity directed toward the target, energy concentrates into a single point. Instead of radiating everywhere, it strikes like a focused hammer blow. He publishes results in 1889. People read, nod, then forget for decades. No one sees battlefield application. There's no massive armor needing piercing. The Monroe Effect remains a scientific curiosity, waiting for its moment. German perfectionism. 1911, Imperial Germany. Egon Neumann, an Austrian engineer, reads Monroe's article and sees practical sense. He forms a conical cavity instead of simple indentation. Results improve significantly. The explosive jet becomes narrower, deeper, exceeding 7,000 meters per second. In 1914, he patents the invention, hollow explosive charge for destruction of armor plates. But World War I begins before full implementation. After Germany's defeat and Treaty of Versailles restrictions, the invention is forgotten. When rearmament begins in the 1930s, old papers emerge from the drawers. Von Thaumann at Rheinmetall reviews work on the Neumann-Monroe Effect. Tanks have appeared, and weapons to stop them are urgently needed. He creates the first experimental shaped charge shell, penetrating 70 millimeters of armor, more than any armor-piercing round of that caliber. Germany gains apparent advantage. They understood the technology's potential first. Theory, engineers, industrial base, all on their side. But here appears Germany's fatal flaw: perfectionism, American pragmatism. 1940, Aberdeen, Proving Ground, Maryland. Swiss engineer Henry Mohaupt demonstrates his invention to American officers: a metal tube, TNT, copper cone, no complex fuses, no elaborate mechanics, simple striker detonation. Officers approach skeptically. Too simple. Mohaupt insists on demonstration. They use captured French tank armor, 80 millimeter hardened steel. Mohaupt detonates. The armor pierces through. A perfectly round 5-centimeter hole. General Gladian Barnes says, "We need this." "How many can you produce monthly?" Mohaupt answers, "The question isn't about me. It's about your industry." The United States shows its real strength. American war industry in 1940 wasn't the world's most refined. Germany had advantages in steel, engineering schools, manufacturing precision, but Americans had scale and pragmatic mass production approach. By late 1941, General Electric, Westinghouse, and others establish serial production. They stamp copper cones like tin cans, pour TNT, assemble in quantity. June 1942, first M1 bazookas enter service. Caliber 60 millimeters, weight 1.5 kilograms, range 100 meters. Penetration, 80 millimeters. Not an engineering masterpiece, but it works and can be produced by thousands. By late 1942, the U.S. manufactures 5,000 bazookas monthly. By mid-1943, 15,000. Each costs $16, cheaper than most rifles. Combat reality. November 1942, Operation Torch, North Africa. American troops use M1 bazookas against German tanks for the first time. Near Tebessa, Algeria, a Panzer IV moves down a narrow street. Commander Kurt Kannerum feels confident. His 50-millimeter frontal armor will withstand American anti-tank rifle rounds. Suddenly, a flash from a window 40 meters away, something flies toward the tank, not a conventional shell, too slow. Impact, explosion, then smoke, then flames. The crew bails out. 3 survive, 2 wounded. Engineers examine the knocked-out Panzer IV. In the frontal armor, a neat 4-centimeter hole, edges melted. Behind the armor, molten metal that passed through the engine compartment and ignited fuel tank. No shell fragments, only copper traces and explosive residue. Reports travel to Berlin. They read and cannot believe it. 60-millimeter rocket weapons penetrating 80-millimeter armor from 40 meters. By known ballistic laws, impossible. But reports arrive continuously from Tunis, Algeria, Morocco. January 1943, near Sfax, Tunisia. German reconnaissance captures an American outpost at night. Among trophies, 2 M1 bazookas, 14 M6 rounds, a crate of instructions, urgently flown to Berlin. February 1943, Kummersdorf. Engineers unwrap the crates. First surprise, weight, 5.9 kilograms, almost nothing. The German Panzerbuchse 1939 anti-tank rifle weighed 12 kilograms and didn't penetrate even 30 millimeters armor. Second surprise, construction. A simple tube. 2 steel semi-cylinders joined by clamps. Primitive firing mechanism. No precise mechanics. No optics. Is this homemade? One engineer asks. Mass-produced, replies Major Ernst von Kunel. Look at the marking. Serial number, factory marked General Electric. They examine the M6 round. Metal tube, stabilizers, nose with copper cone. They unscrew the nose. Inside T in charge and thin copper cone stamped with visible press marks. They make them on ordinary stamping presses, Kunel says, like tin cans. In Germany, shaped charges are manufactured with precision. Cones turned on special lathes, each passing quality control, expensive and slow. Americans stamp them almost like nails. And worst of all, it works. Testing and revelation. February 1943, Kummersdorf firing range. Germans mount captured armor, an 80-millimeter plate from a French B-1 tank. Oberleutnant Werner Oswald shoulders the bazooka, aims at 50 meters, fires. The round flies straight. Impact, explosion, smoke. Engineers run to the target. Clean circular hole, 5 centimeters diameter. Edges beveled inward, melted. Behind the plate, at 1 meter distance, a wooden panel charred and pierced by molten metal fragments. Cunell measures penetration depth, 140 millimeters. That's more than our 75 millimeter Pak 40, he says quietly. The Pak 40 is Germany's best anti-tank gun of 1943. It weighs 1,425 kilograms, requires 5 crew, fires armor-piercing rounds penetrating 120 millimeters at 500 meters. The bazooka weighs 6 kilograms. 1 soldier carries it, and it penetrates more from 50 meters. They fire 10 more shots. Results consistent. 70 to 80 millimeter penetration at obliquities up to 30 degrees, up to 140 millimeters at direct hit. A detailed 48-page report concludes Americans created a weapon simpler than any German analog, cost 10 times less, 3 times more effective than anti-tank rifles, can be mass manufactured without special tooling. Germany loses this race because while they search for perfection, Americans made good enough and launched mass production. German response. March 1943, Berlin Reich, Ministry of Armaments. Albert Speer reads the report. He understands industry and sees simple truth. Germany is losing not only on battlefields, but in factories. The U.S. produces 2,000 tanks monthly. Germany, 600. The U.S. manufactures 15,000 bazookas monthly. Germany, none. Speer summons Cunell. Can we copy this? Yes, Cunell replies. But there's a problem. German engineers are developing the Panzerschreck, Raketenpanzerbuchse 54, technically superior 88 millimeter caliber instead of 60, penetration 160 millimeters instead of 80, greater range, better sights. But more complex, heavier, 11 kilograms versus 6, more expensive, 70 Reichsmarks versus 30. Why can't we just copy the American? Asks Speer. Because our engineers won't accept good enough, answers Cunell. They strive for perfect. This is Germany's decisive problem. In the Third Reich exists a cult of engineering excellence. Every design must be a masterpiece. The Tiger, one of the best tanks but complex and costly. Americans make the Sherman, not perfect, but reliable and mass-produced. Speer understands but cannot change the system. German industry is configured for quality, not quantity. Reorganizing means halting production for months. The war is already underway. He orders, make the Panzerschreck better, more complex, more expensive. First samples reach the front August 1943. Indeed, superior to the Bazooka, but by then Americans have produced 200,000 bazookas. Battlefield impact. September 1943, Operation Avalanche, Salerno, Italy. Company Charlie of the 36th Infantry Division has 3 M9A1 bazookas. At 7:30 a.m., Germans launch counterattack. 4 Panzer IVs and 2 Tigers. Corporal James Connor sees a Tiger crawling out 120 meters away. He knows Tiger frontal armor is 100 millimeters. On paper, M9A1 can penetrate 120 millimeters. But paper differs from combat. He loads an M6A3 round, sprints to a broken wall, shortening distance to 80 meters. The Tiger turns its turret. Connor aims at the flank where armor is about 80 millimeters. He fires. The round strikes midship. Short explosion, Tiger stops. Smoke. Crew abandons vehicle. Later, engineers inspect. A neat 6-centimeter hole in the side. The shaped charge jet pierced armor. Fuel tank, ignited ammunition. A Tiger cost 250,000 Reichsmarks. A bazooka, $18. The shot, $2. Statistics tell the story. October 1943. German engineers examine the knocked-out Tiger from Salerno. Under microscope, perforation edges appear melted, curled inward, not mechanical punching, but thermal cutting. The shape-charged jet acts like a supersonic cutter. Temperature about 5,000 degrees Celsius, velocity up to 8,000 meters per second, pressure roughly 500,000 atmospheres. At such magnitudes, armor behaves like liquid. December 1943, Aberdeen. Engineers refine the bazooka, removing largest shortcomings quickly and cheaply. January 1944, new M9A1 with improved blast deflector, updated M6A3 round. Penetration reaches 150 millimeters. By June 1944, Normandy landings, American forces have about 60,000 9A1 bazookas. Germans have about 8,000 Panzerschreck, technically stronger, but 8 times fewer. September 1944. U.S. Army Ordnance Department report German tanks destroyed in France. June-August. By bazookas, 412. By American tanks, 347. By anti-tank guns, 289. By aviation, 198. A bazooka costing $18 destroys more tanks than the $50,000 Sherman. But there's a price. Bazooka crew losses per 100 tanks destroyed, 130 casualties. Sherman crew losses per 100 tanks, 43 casualties. Too little, too late. August 1944. Germany admits defeat in the shaped charge race. Dr. Heinrich Langweiler proposes radical solution, disposable launcher. Disposable weapons shock German engineers, seems wasteful, an affront to quality cult. But Langweiler shows numbers. Panzerschreck costs 70 Reichsmarks, needs 8 production hours. His disposable variant costs 30 marks, produced in half an hour. Speer approves. Production begins. Faust Patrone, Panzerfaust 30, steel tube 44 millimeters diameter, 80 centimeters long, 100 millimeters warhead, mass 5.1 kilograms, penetration up to 200 millimeters, range about 30 meters, plan 200,000 units monthly. The Panzerfaust is simpler than the Bazooka, precisely because it's single-use. By capitulation, roughly 6.7 million produced. Germans finally learned the lesson, not chasing ideal, but choosing good enough and mass production. But the awakening comes late. In August 1944, the war rolls against Germany. By then, Americans have produced 460,000 bazookas. Final chapter, December 1944, Ardennes offensive. Over 1,000 German tanks attack, including King Tigers, with 150 millimeter frontal armor. December 20th, Bastogne. The 101st Airborne, encircled, has 60 M9 A1s and 500 rounds. Germans assault the town. First day, 18 vehicles knocked out, 11 by bazookas. By December 22nd, fewer than 100 rounds remain. December 23rd, aircraft drop supplies including 400 bazooka rounds. Soldiers embrace the containers. The bazooka is their lifeline. December 24th, Chinogny. Private Robert Max, 19, waits with a bazooka in church ruins. A King Tiger crawls along the road, 68 tons in 150 millimeter frontal armor. Max knows his M6A3 penetrate is about 150 millimeters. The front is hopeless. He waits until the tank passes, steps onto the road behind it, distance 20 meters. Target rear plate where armor is thinner. Shot, impact. The shape-charged jet ignites fuel. Explosion throws Max to the ground. He receives the Silver Star. Most importantly, he lives because he had a bazooka. The final irony. April 1945. Berlin's last month. Red Army assaults with 2.5 million personnel, 6,250 tanks. Defenders hold 500,000 armed with Panzerfausts. Volkssturm. 16-year-old boys and 60-year-old grandfathers fire at T. 34s from 30 meters. Soviet armor losses exceed 800 in Berlin, large share from Panzerfausts. But it no longer saves Germany. May 8th. Capitulation. The Panzerfaust is technically stronger than the bazooka. Greater penetration, 200 millimeters versus 150. Simpler single-use design, lower cost. Germans finally learned the lesson. Simple, cheap mass. But they learned it 3 years too late. And those 3 years decided the war, the lesson. September 1943, German engineers lean over a disassembled bazooka, unable to grasp how something so simple can be so effective. The problem wasn't knowledge. Egon Neumann patented the idea in 1914, 28 years before American assembly lines. Nor was it technology. German industry was Europe's most precise. The failure lay in philosophy, a cult of perfection. Americans bet on pragmatism. Their solutions weren't flawless. Sherman lost to Panther in frontal duels. Bazooka trailed Panzerschreck in penetration. But Sherman could be built 50,000 times. Bazooka 500,000 times. Quantity outweighed quality. Albert Speer later wrote, "We spent months perfecting every screw." The Americans stamped good enough and outpaced us tenfold. When I understood this, it was too late. The bazooka's lesson, strategy of speed and scale. Physics is patient. The Monroe Effect always existed, merely waiting for its time. When that time came, a simple copper cone and explosive charge shifted the balance, gave infantry a chance, made war less hopeless. Today, in museums, we see scuffed M9A1 tubes and struggle to believe such simplicity swayed a continent. German engineers at Kummersdorf saw differently, realizing they'd lost not on technique but on approach. Because sometimes good enough defeats perfect. Speed is quality. Simplicity is complexity. The perfect weapon arriving late loses to the sufficient one arriving today. Germans sought perfection. Americans sought results. The war showed who was right, and the copper liner, simple, stamped like a tin can, became the symbol of pragmatism, defeating perfectionism.